So, welcome back. We are continuing Bezos Hashem in Perek Zayin, the 7th chapter of Shaykh V'Emunah. We left off last week on page Pei Beis, which is 82, but Pei Beis on the opposite side would be 162. This is in the original text. You can follow along with the English text wherever you have the opportunity to do so. But as we always mention time and again, wherever you're watching this, it's always to appreciate the best of the ability to learn and absorb is on the original site, just because you have the text in a separate scroll bar that it's easy to follow along with the class, or like we say, wherever you're learning Tanya, in this, the website would be tanyaonline.com. Also, the opportunity to see all the previous classes, which are lined up on the left side. Shaykh V'Emunah itself, this segment, which we began just a few short months ago. I say a few short months ago because it had been quite a few years that we learned together the Likutei Amorim, the first part of Tanya, and so relatively it's a shorter amount of time, but we're holding on the 7th chapter, this entire segment, as we misspoke a few times, that this segment has 12 chapters, and we're holding the 7th. So again, as mentioned, you could see all the previous classes, even the Likutei Amorim, on the same site, and it opens up in the same fashion with the text in a separate scroll bar, as such, easy to follow. We did point out also in the very beginning, and maybe a few times between the basis of this unique study, Shaykh V'Emunah, literally translated as the gateway into oneness, unity, and faith. And the Alter Rebbe brings us in through this gateway, and as we said it briefly, though boldly, that entering this gate, the way the Alter Rebbe presents these concepts of Yichud V'Emunah, oneness of Hashem, faith in Hashem, you will not come out in the same way. It's guaranteed. The Alter Rebbe's presentation is not only unique, but really brings in everyone who studies this thoroughly to a total new level of appreciation of the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that it's not a concept, and it's not just something we say and proclaim sometimes loudly, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, but it's a matter of appreciating it, visualizing it naturally with our sensory eye, but godliness via this presentation becomes real. The oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes a new stand and a new appreciation in our human minds, that we're able to see and appreciate something we did not appreciate before learning the Shaykh V'Emunah. Our faith, even though faith by definition is something which you can't understand, but the quality of faith is obviously takes a different turn. It takes a different, total different appreciation and clarity and authenticity. The faith becomes simply more genuine and authentic. So we were holding over here on Pei Beis, on this same page. It's about a third from the bottom of the page. V'zeu shiluv shem adnas b'shem Abaye. Alter Rebbe does something extraordinary in this chapter Zayin, which is a follow-up of Vav of Dalid. Again, we did speak Hey is a unique period on its own, even though there are obviously the connecting points to the Dalid and thereafter the Vav, but it's unique. But Zayin, Alter Rebbe starts articulating this message, which he began in Perek Dalid based on that famous question Alter Rebbe left off in the 3rd chapter, all a click away really. And then went into it on Vav, and Zayin not only brings it home even more, but even more than Vav. Even the Vav, you see the culminating words of Vav. Einenu daber b'fnei atzmei Hashem hu Elikim. Okay, naturally you have to appreciate these words. Those of you who are learning along with us can appreciate how Vav, definitely brings it home on its own. But Zayin, the Alter Rebbe starts articulating this manner that if we had truly appreciated this message even up till now, there's a question how we can continue function normally. But say with all honesty that if you appreciate this vart of the Alter Rebbe, which he concluded in the last class, and he And the next few words, next 5 lines, really brings that very message home. It's hard to understand it or appreciate it, perceive it, and move along normally with normal chores and involvements, which we are involved even by Torah mandate. Because what the Alter Rebbe is really telling us, there's a famous word of the Baal Shem Tov. He says categorically, we would have to bench HaGoimel every time we daven, because if you really experienced a real healthy davening, the way davening is meant to be, even according to halacha, is brought in Sifrei Halacha, it's about Ispashtus HaGashmis, when removing himself from the physical, the whole image of the physicality of the world, which a person perhaps appreciated Elam Haza, perceives Elam Haza, this physical world, and prior to davening, by davening, it's the hispashtas of that, the removal of that, total experience of transcendency. That is the definition of davening, even according to halacha, much more so according to Chassidus, which Chassidus explains this idea of Hashem Echad. So the Hashem said, if you're really there, if you exercise the real healthy davening, so you are really part of the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And part of the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is usually associated with bittul b'mitzias. Again, El Rebbe has this term over here because if the window was open, meaning to say if there was not that cap of Bura, Shem Elikim, Adnos, Malchus, again as explained in the previous chapters, everything would be completely consumed into the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It wouldn't stand a chance even to exist. Not only exist and be submissive or demonstrate overt submissiveness to the Hashem Echad, but it wouldn't even exist, bittul b'mitzias, and that's really the level a person reaches through davening, that he enters into the world of Achdus, true Achdus Hashem, and that causes a certain state of bittul b'mitzias. So from the perspective of, where the Baal Shem Tov is really relating to us, is had you come back and were able to, go back to land after davening, even, it says there's steps in landing, even within the context of the prayer itself, from which every part of prayer subsequent to the Amidah, the peak of the prayer, is another rung as we land, Asher Balitzin, Ayim, and Kavi Aleinu, as explained in Sifrei Kabbalah, Chassidus, and so on. But even after that, you land with a shir and Torah, but then eventually, Hanig Bahem Minig Derecheres, like the Gemara in Brachas, that you got to go out there. So how did you ultimately land if you were really Batal B'Mitzias, mean to say you reached the point of true Achdus, true oneness? And the Baal Shem Tov says, as such, you should really bench HaGoimel, categorically after every davening, when a person just meant to daven the way he's meant to daven, if he succeeded with the davening, he should have benched HaGoimel, because the fact that you're able to come from that state back to, so to say, the reality the way it's world, not the true reality, but the reality from the perspective of Elam Haza, and move on again, even with the Torah mandates, to go to work the way Torah wants you to go to work, and do all the things which Torah wants you to do, as in Elam Haza, and that is all the ultimate mandate of a Yid, Lasses Leizbaruch Dira B'Tachteinim, to make a Hashem a dwelling place in this very physical world. But how did you get there? Were you able, from davening, when you were in a state of bittul b'mitzias, to come down, land even to all the good stuff you're doing subsequent to davening? And he says it's one big miracle, and that Hashem allowed this to happen, and therefore, Ben Shagaimel, like any other miracle, to the blessing of HaGoimel, famous blessing, when someone experiences a miracle, says HaGoimel, so, you should do so. But in halacha, it's not brought such a psak din, and the Baal Shem Tov himself agrees that, we don't say HaGoimel every day for reasons that we just don't do, even though, the Gemara says someone says Hallel every day. There's so many reasons to say Hallel, perhaps every day. If you think about it, we say Maidim, that Hashem perform miracles every day and wonders. And not only once a day, but morning, afternoon, and evening, as if we're honest with ourselves, we see all those miracles, but we don't say Hallel every day because there's unique times for Hallel. Similarly, perhaps, a Goimel every day. So there's no psak din like that, but the message, the energy of the message is that's what davening is really all about, to enter into this world that naturally, if you will, you shouldn't be able to come out of this world because you're already there, Batal B'Mitzias. And I'm saying this because if you're really, really able to meditate and ponder this information, the Alter Rebbe speaks about the Bittul of Mitzias, in other words, that oneness of Shem Avaya and Shem Adnas, that everything is truly batal, everything is truly annulled, and that's the emes And like to the extent that Bitul Eir Hashemesh B'Shemesh, we concluded quickly pretty much at the end of the class, but we need not to mention, not then and not now, we elaborated on this famous mashal in Shayich Emunah, that brings it in the third chapter. The Bitul is so strong, like the Eir Hashemesh B'Shemesh, the ray of the sun, when it's within the sun, that doesn't have any mitzias, and so too, nothing exists, nor time nor place. The whole phenomenon of Elam Haza, which is comprised of time and place, doesn't exist really from the perspective of Shem Havaya. And that's the truth. Like we gave examples, the master, even though he's teaching his a student, and it's somebody new to the study, and he has to condense and contract all his knowledge in order to convey it to the pupil. Nonetheless, he never, for one moment, ceases to be that great Goin, prodigy, again in the context of Torah knowledge, Torah scholarship. He remains the same Talmid Chacham, and even when he's teaspooning this information to the child, or to someone who's new at the study, he right away, everything what he says, he sees the inner message and the depth and breadth of that very piece of information that he has needed to contract the depth and breadth in order to extract that information. But within the information, he sees all that. And so too, from the perspective of Shem Havaya, the whole Zman and Mokim really doesn't exist from the perspective of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Time and place, it's not locked in. To the contrary, the adness, the real chayis comes from Shem Havaya. Adness is the cap, which again energized by Gvura. As the Alter Rebbe explains in Perek Dalet, is the meaning of Gvura, which is the cap, that we shouldn't see things the way they truly are. But when we know this, and Alter Rebbe shared this information with us, whoa, if we really understood that and really perceived that, I don't know how we can continue. That's pretty much the story of Nadav Avihu. They understood the depth of reality, or the godliness, which reality, physical reality, doesn't really exist in the face of Hashem, the emes Hashem, and therefore they were consumed and subsumed into this Shem Havaya, and that automatically, consequently, caused the expiration of their goof, of their body, which is known to be Kleis HaNefesh, the outpour of the soul, because the soul appreciates really what's really going on behind the scene. So again, maybe it's a miracle that we don't have that Kleis HaNefesh, even though, there's no question, once someone appreciates this, his next davening, his subsequent davening, if it's Mincha or Ma'ariv or Shachris, which we again expand more with time and energy and focus. We do that every prayer, but Shachris simply is a longer davening. We have the ability to appreciate the emes in such a different level, different manner following this study. So yes, our davening is definitely a different type of davening. A yid who davens after absorbing the message of Shayich B'Emunah, it's incomparable, that type of davening, as before he learns this information. And we're not talking about, obviously, not even to negate. It's not talking about external movements and shouts and screaming. We're talking about truly appreciating the energy of Hashem Echad. And the culminating word of the Alter Rebbe, which he will begin this week, is Zeu Shiluv Shem Adnas B'Shem Havaya. The idea that the whole phenomenon of time and place is just a cap, and again, coming from the same Hashem. So Be'etzem Zman Mokim really doesn't have its own independability, because it's coming from Adnas, true, also a Koyach Aliki, a godly Koyach, but the Adnas itself is bottled to the Shem Havaya. Like in that example, even after the master contracts that information, it's always, he never loses that status of a master, a knowledgeable individual with full of the depth of depth of that scholarship which he's invested in, even as he's talking in this particular manner that he is presenting that concept to the pupil after contracting the depth and breadth of this concept. But he remains, like we said, when he says this mashal, that there was once a king, the mashalim, we spoke about it last week, the metaphor has brought so much in Medrash when he wants to tell us about the relationship Am Yisrael, the Am Yisrael has with Hashem. By Moshe, there was once a king, the king had a beloved friend, which the Medrash would say that's ultimately Moshe, and the king is Hashem. So when he says the word, for example, to the child, there was once a king, to him on the onset it's Hashem, and he had a good friend, it's Moshe Rabbeinu. He never loses anything. And again, this is just even there, that for the master is also kind of simple, but there's every concept has such depth to it, and the master never loses it. From the perspective of Shem Havaya, Adnos really doesn't exist. It's a cap which Hashem himself put on, Kaviyachal himself, that it should appear that there is time, there's place, Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Yimlech, like we said, this exists only in the Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu when it comes to Shem Havaya. We spoke about this a few times the last few weeks. Havaya is Hoya, Hoyve, B'yeh, Ke'echad. That's what the name, it's embedded in the name itself. There's no past, present, and future. There's no phenomenon of time. It's all one. By Malchus you find Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Yimlech, which is the past, present, and future, the establishment of past, present, and future, which is coming from the Malchus itself, coming from the Hashem Adnos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's where it's created. That's where it comes to being, and so to place. But the whole idea of the whole Shem Adnos and Shem Adnos, what Shem Adnos produces, which is time and place, it's really all part of the Shem Havaya. And that's what Alter Rebbe writes again. This was basically the message in last week's class. Click away, but we elaborate a little more in detail. We find that's the whole point of wonders and miracles and Torah, with Hashem is saying, don't feel this is locked in the way it looks to be locked in time and place. This reality, that reality, I'll show you. Blood, water could turn into blood, and water could split into 12 paths for all Am Yisrael to miraculously cross. It's just not locked in. I'll show you. I'll open up a little deeper window. You'll see that everything can change and did change. Because the whole Adnos is really the Shiluv. The Shiluv is the combination and the synthesis of Adnos into Shem Havaya, which is again the basis of all the miracles which Am Yisrael experienced collectively and individually. Famous story of Chanina ben Deisa, Mishamer l'Shem v'yalik, Yemer l'Chemet v'yalik. There was no oil, he needed fire. Vinegar doesn't burn, oil does naturally. Oil does, vinegar doesn't, but the vinegar turned on Chanina ben Deisa, which was a holy person. He really was in the world, in the level of Shem Havaya. He said, yeah, whoever decided oil is going to burn, this could decide that vinegar would burn. And it did. Because, Hashem wants us to make a dira b'tachteinim, a dwelling place in this world. And Shem Bereshis bara Elikim, obviously, again, you see Elikim, not Havaya, because Elikim is the energy which eventually establishes the whole Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Adnos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's where Hashem wants us to bring His message and His presence, the awareness of Hashem precisely in a world which is created with Malchus, with this time and place of the whole framework, and the details and the makeup of Elam Hazan. Nisav HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lisle Dira B'Tachteinim. And this Tachteinim, as we mentioned again 2 weeks ago as well, is established through the Malchus. And that's where Hashem wants us to bring His message. Not in the world of Shem Havaya. You don't need to bring a message of Elokus Shem Havaya. That's the only thing in the area of Shem Havaya. That's the only thing that exists. So there's a plan. There's a master plan which we work and deal with this master plan on a constant basis. From the inception, from the time Hashem created the world, and more specifically the inception of Am Yisrael as a nation, that this is their mandate to bring Elokus into the areas of Shem Adna. Ein melech b'lei am lashon eimim, as we spoke about this again in the previous classes, again a click away. But what Hashem showed us, and this gave us also the energy and the focus, that remember, this is all the cap of Malchus, and it's not locked in, meaning to say, I'll show you that it'll change. Shemesh be given day, the sun stops. Time stopped at a certain time in the fight of Yeshua, again, because the sun stopped at a certain place. And sun never is always on the go, but it stopped. Shemesh be given daim. It's a daim because of the shira, the song sings, keeps its movement, but it stopped. Literally stopped saying shira. The sun stopped because it's all this, including the movement of the sun and every expression of any of the tzva shamayim, the army, the heaven of army, and everything which exists within Elam Haza, is all part of an extension of and vitalized and established through this Adnos, Shem Malchus. But Shem Adnos is Mishulav. It's one with the Shem Havaya, and therefore completely batal, and whatever Adnos produces is also batal when we see it from the true perspective. We gave then again, I think, a simple, silly example. When the green light, what you see, or the red light, what you see, there's nothing intrinsically green or light or red, or rather, it's not a green light. There's no light in the green or in the red. It's just something covering the brightness of that bulb, and it dims the bulb for that matter. But there's a message which comes through the green that you know what to do, or to go if it's red, to stop. But what is it? It's the bulb which is coming through that particular cap. It's Shem Havaya through Shem Adnas, but and that's what allows Adnas to produce. But nonetheless, it's all bottle. It's all part of really the Shem Havaya, and as such, everything is truly bottle b'mitzias. And that's what he says. Shiluv Shem Adnas b'Shem Havaya. Ki Shem Havaya made a shul l'mayla min hazman, because the Shem Havaya shows that it's transcendent of time. Because again, he repeats this, or he mentions this here. Because that is what Shem Havaya, past, present, and future, in one moment. We studied about the Torah comes from Shem Havaya. As such, it's not like Hashem saw through 3,000 years and felt, everything what I wrote in the Torah. Then he's dictated in the Torah 3,300 years and so much, and plus years. I believe it's going to work 300 years later. No, Torah comes from a place. We spoke about this again at length. There comes a place of Shem Havaya. There's no time. It's not that Hashem has the dynamic eye, is able to see through 3,300 years. It's just coming from a place where years don't exist. So, as such, the eternity of Torah is not even to be, it's not even there to negotiate, because it's not a matter of does it have relevance in this particular time. Torah comes from a place which is transcendent of time and of place, and as such relevant at all times, at all places. Just like it was relevant the first time when Hashem gave the Torah. And we spoke about also the idea that a tzaddik couldn't see, a tzaddik who lives the life of Shem within Shem Havaya. That's the energy of the tzaddik. He's able to tell somebody thousands of miles away to check his mezuzah. So now he has that dynamic eye which crosses the Atlantic or thousands of miles, and he's able to see what's going on in the mezuzah by the other. It's the whole idea. It doesn't exist time, place, miles from the area of Shem Havaya. And the tzaddik which lives the life of Shem Havaya, he's on that plane. And he's able to tell someone, yes, check your mezuzah. And obviously there's other dynamics there which he sees something in the Yid's relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this is missing, that is missing, but it's all a Shem Havaya type of expression. We said the story last week of the Baal Shem Tov, famous story of the Baal Shem Tov, also quick away, we won't say it again, but it's definitely something worth it to listen to. You see the idea that the truth is Shem Havaya, the truth of Shem Havaya is, or Shem Havaya is about beyond time, beyond place. It's higher than time. It's transcendent of place. And it's not limited by place, because it's the creator of place. Now, in itself, there isn't, from the perspective of Shem Havaya, there is no place. There's no mokoim, because everything, from the perspective, he took off the cap of Malchus, he took off the cap of Gvura, everything would have been really consumed into the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The finite, anything associated with finitude does not stand a chance to exist even in the face of infinity. Like the sun, the sun would become a bit closer to the Earth, to the planet Earth. It's not like things that would have been a little warmer. The North Pole would have just been a little warmer. No. The sun came a little bit too close. Everything would be burnt up into the heat of the sun. It wouldn't be just a bit warmer, a little bit more uncomfortable. Everything would have been burnt up to the heat of the sun. So it's in other places. There's also the wonders of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that it's in a particular space, a little, if it would distance itself, the world would freeze, and get a little too close, the world would burn up. But that's the point. Shemesh U'Mogen Hashem Elikim. It fits so nicely with that pirush. Again, it's not the simple pirush of that pasuk, but as the Alter Rebbe explains this in the beginning of Shar Shem Beperik Hey, Shemesh U'Mogen Hashem Elikim. There's a mogen. There's cover up. Elikim. Hashem Elikim. Elikim is a mogen. It covers up Hashem Havaya. So Havaya creates, and from the perspective of Havaya, there is no mogen. There is no place, just like there is no time. But Hashem create the Shem Havaya is the energy which would create through the cap. It would create the time. The whole phenomenon of time. So it's not limited, it's just the energy, and just take away that cap, there is no time. And if the cap does produce time, it's because the energy of Shem Havaya. Adnas doesn't have its own energy. Adnas is the cap through which the Shem Havaya, the energy of Shem Havaya goes through. So if the Shem Havaya, like in the example I gave you, open up that box, you only see a bright light. It's much more bright than with the green and the red and the yellow. It actually dims that brightness. And more so, it just would cause disorder on the streets. So you have the cap, dims it, different lightings, darker and different colors, and then it sends a message. But the green doesn't have any light, the red doesn't have any its own light, the yellow doesn't have its own light. It's bright because of the bowl which is standing behind. So too Adis doesn't have its own energy which creates place mokim. It's the Shem Havaya which is shooting infinite light. And Shem Malchus, with the energy of Gvura, limits that, contains that. Again, it's Hashem's decision, which is another midah, another character by Kodesh Baruch Hu, limits that and establishes that this light of Shem Havaya, which is an infinite light of Kodesh, nothing would be able to exist in famous Shem Havaya, but it limits it, Gvura, that in order, and again the energy of Gvura via Malchus, that place and time should come about. That's the Adnos, which is again, it's a limiting kayach, it's Gvura, restraint, which is about taking that air which would come down, rush down infinitely, like that same example, be very bright, that you put something on, but that what you're putting on, it looks like it's brightening up, but it's not brightening up anything. It's just covering up with a certain color and style and bringing out the light of the bulb which is behind that color. It doesn't have any light on its own. And so it covers up the brightness and it sends a message. Malchus covers up on that brightness of Shem Havaya, which is the only energy. Havaya is the one Mehaveh. The Alter Rebbe made it clear. Mehaveh comes from Shem Havaya, but the energy coming from Shem Havaya is just infinite. Or is infinite, so nothing finite can stand in the face of infinity. So what the cap of Malchus does, it allows the air which comes on the other side, should be air which is a finite air, time, place, which is again the makeup of Elam Hazeh. But Shem Havaya is transcendent of time. It's the creator, it's the energy which establishes time, place. In this context, he's saying place. The whole phenomenon of mokim, place, maila, mata, and four corners on the top, the bottom, and the four corners. It creates that. It is the energy of that. Naturally, with the cap of Adnas and Malchus, with the energy of Gvura. So it's not limited by that. And you have the whole entire the Adnos with whatever it produces. In essence, it's bottled Hashem Havaya, so really nothing exists. Elam Hazeh, this is all, it's just not, doesn't have its own existence. Shilav Adne Behavaya, right? The Adne is Aleph Daled Nun Yud. Hashem Havaya also has Yud, K, and Vav, and a K, which is 4 letters. So Yud, K, Vav, K is the infinite energy. Aleph Daled Nun is that Doin Kol Ha'oretz, that cap, which establishes an the nation, again, as we spoke about this last week, 2 weeks ago, Doin Kol Ha'oretz, and that Adnos establishes Elam Hazeh, time and place. But the truth of the matter is the Shilav Havaya Adnos. The Adnos, these 4 letters, they become, they're one, they're part, they synchronize, synthesize, and fuse together. But what stands supreme is obviously the Shem Havaya. That's where the energy is. That's where the true energy is. Or that's solely where the energy is. Adnos is the cap which allows the energy to come out through Zman, Mokim, time and place, and so on, which is the comprising of Elam Hazeh, the comprise of Elam Hazeh. And but in essence, it's completely bottled and whatever it produces. So if you think about really this idea of the Shilav Adnos Bavaya, so really, how could we go on based on how we begin the class today? This is the Yichudi law. This is the supreme oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if we really appreciated this, there would be Kleis HaNefesh, there would be the expiration of the soul in very. Nothing could exist, because that's the truth. From the perspective of Shem Havaya, nothing really can exist. So if a person appreciates this thoroughly, there's that certain, what would be anchoring him down to not to be subsumed into this reality. So it's part of maybe the Nes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we're able to understand. We have enough anchoring us down, let's be honest. We have the bodily needs and desires, and animalistic desires, and so other stuff, which is again anchoring us down with quite its strength. And we need to average people don't have to be so concerned. But if someone refines his guf, his body, his nefesh bahamis, elevates it, sublimates it, it shouldn't be so animalistic. And that itself allows the godly message via the nefesh, the godly soul, to come into expression there's a concept, Kleis HaNefesh. Spoke the famous story of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe at a certain time, when he was learning famously with Rabbi Rama Malach, famous story, which was the son of the Mizrahi Magid. He was called a Malach because his whole life was angelic. You're talking about somebody which was true. His body was completely, he had a spiritual goof, if you will. Obviously it was physical, but everything about him was spiritual to the extent that he adapted this name, or not he, but he was appreciated as a Malach, a Liki, a godly angel, because everything was about him was very angelic. And the Chavrusa, again, there's a backdrop. There's the Chavrusa, the Alter Rebbe taught him Nigla, he taught the Alter Rebbe Pnimis HaTeira. But again, there's a whole backdrop, as in when the Alter Rebbe came to his master, the Mizrahi Magid. But at a certain point in the middle of the study, the Alter Rebbe asked for a bagel and butter. And he explained himself later. He says, the stuff I was studying, if I wouldn't get that bagel and butter to anchor me down yet again, or to anchor me down at the moment, I would have, he admitted on his own, I would have been in another world within moments. His body would have expired because of his appreciation of the clarity of this message of Shem Havaya. How everything is truly bottled to Shem Havaya. So, yeah, there were another Aviv. Classically, this was their experience. You look at the Eir Chaim, explains us the whole episode of Nadav Aviv, the children of Aaron, that they had this Kleis HaNefesh, because they appreciated somewhat of this message, of this energy, that in essence everything is bottled to the Shem Havaya. So that's the Yichud Ilah. Here the Alter Rebbe continues, see there's the dot, the period. Then he goes on, he's going to say, now I'm going to tell you what Yichud Tata is. Yichud Tata is, it's also about the message of oneness. But you're not looking at the bittul, the total nothingness which exists, of all the production of Shem Havaya, and that subsumption of the whole energy of Shem Havaya to the truth of the of Adna, which is Malchus, in its complete subsumption to the emes of the energy of Malchus itself, which is Shem Havaya, and then nothing exists. That's the Yichud Ilah, the supreme oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Everything is batel b'mitzias. But he says, no, there's another way of looking at all. There's a shil of Avaya ba'adna, right? You have there's two ways of something could combined. You have the Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is 4 letters, and then you have the Shem Adna, 4 letters. So there's one way you can combine, like they mishulavim. In other words, they fuse together what dominates the Shem Havaya, and then you have the Adna, could be the one not dominating, but the message really is the Adna, and the Shem Havaya is mishulav into the Adna, which is, when we say on top, it's not only obviously in place what goes first, and then everything would follow suit, but what's the message, what's the emphasis? The Alter Rebbe speaks about over here the Yichud Tata, that even when you're going to look in from the perspective of Shem Adna, and that's the word Tata, the void, not the Echad, but the void, as we explained this in the very beginning of Perek Zayin, click away, right? The first class of the Perek Zayin, the difference of Echad and void, which is the Yichud Tata message, that even if you're going to look at Adnas itself, Kaviyachal. I say Kaviyachal because you can never remove Shem Havaya, because Shem Havaya is the energy. So look at the light itself. You can't ever look at the glass itself and find light in the glass, because the glass doesn't have any light. That green it's not a green light. There's a white bulb behind it. But let's say you're going to look at it, the green itself, and in this case you're going to look of the message of Shem Adna, that the Eibishter is a kayach, which he becomes which is the kayach of contraction based on the energy of Vura, like we just explained, and as such produces the production of the other side of Adna. In other words, what Adna produces is Amalashon Aimamis, in other words, extinguished, doesn't carry the fire of Elokus, as such creates the whole phenomenon of time and place, which comprises Elam Haza. And you focus on that. The message of Yichud Tata is, it says, yeah, the Shem Havaya is coming through that as well. Not the everything bottle, completely non-existence, from the perspective of Shem Havaya, and everything is truly batel mitzias, and truly is batel mitzias, because Yichud Ilah is not exclusive to Yichud Tata. They both exist. It depends from where you're looking at. If you're looking for the Shem Havaya, nothing truly exists, and nothing truly exists. Doesn't exist. Because from the perspective of the truth of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the emes Hashem, the true Hashem is infinite. So finite, anything associated with the finite cannot exist in the face of the infinite. And if you ponder on that and you appreciate the bittul of that cap of Adnas to Shem Havaya, nothing exists. Bittul and Mitzias, Yichud Ilah. But Yehuda Alter Rebbe is telling us now that when you look at the Shem Adna, you look at the production of Adna, which is Mokim Zman, this place, 5 after 2, 10 to 4, 10 after 8, which is again the creation, Bereshis Bora Likim Zashamayim V'Zoros. The Likim was through the Shem Havaya naturally. Be'ema says Hashem Likim Eretz Hashemayim. You see a few psukim later in the beginning of Bereshis. Bereshis Bora Likim is not mentioning that because he wants to speak about the Bria. The moment you introduce Shem Havaya, you can't really emphasize so much the Bria creation. So it says Bereshis Bora Likim Hashemayim V'Zoros. Later it says Be'ema says Hashem Likim Eretz Hashemayim. That the Elikim is just a cap over the true energy which exists Shem Havaya. So when you say Bereshis Bar Elikim, you focus on the Elikim, which is Shem Adnas, Malchus. It's all similar idea, synonymous with Malchus and Adnas. Shem Elikim, as we explained. And you focus on that, and you see the Bara, the whole creation, time, place, and whatever this world is comprised, and namely time and place, but then the millions and billions and beyond details, which is associated even with Elam Hazeh, because it exists on high as well. From the perspective of higher than Malchus, there's no Elam HaYetzira, no Elam HaBriya, no Gan Eden HaTach, no Gan Eden HaElyon. From the perspective of higher than Malchus. The Alter Rebbe makes it so clear in Shayich V'Emunah, in this segment that we're learning. But look at Elam Hazeh. That your focus over here is on the Malchus, your focus is on the Elikim, which bara Shemayim V'Aretz. Heaven and earth and everything which isn't in heaven and earth. So you're focusing on the Tato, and then you realize that there's the Shiluv of Havaya Be'adna, that you're emphasizing the Adna, but in every detail. Look close into that time and space, you could find the Shem Havaya, the Emes Havaya there. And that would be called, in terminology of Chassidus and Kabbalah, Bittul, not Bittul Mitzias, but Bittul Ayesh. I am, but everything, and I am because the focus is on, from Elikim, Malchus, Shem Adnas, Gvura, right? And so therefore, I am and I exist, and time and place exist from that perspective and point of view. But there's the Shiluv, and that's the focus, the Elikim, which created heaven and earth. But Mishulab, you look deeper into that, you will find the energy of Shem Havaya. So that's the point of, and that's the idea of Bitla Yesh. In other words, it exists, Yesh, but the Yesh is batal. The Yesh is submissive, is subservient to something higher calling. Not that it doesn't exist, Bitl B'Mitzias, because then you're just focusing on the Shem Havaya, then everything is batal into the Shem Havaya. Stands with total annulment to the Shem Havaya, to the spirit of Shem Havaya. No, here you're focusing on Shem Elikim, on Shem Adnas. And that's the Yesh, which is again, Yesh, you can say the existence, which comes as a result of the Shem Adnas, time, place, and whatever. We find the Elam Hazeh as a Mitzias Yesh, it exists. And there we say, you should know that this existence is really bottled to something, to a higher calling, which is Shem Havaya, for example, which is the Shil of Shem Havaya Be'adnas, because here the emphasis on the Adna and the being woven together is starting with the Aleph of Adna, and as such everything follows suit, as we pointed out earlier pointed out. Once you have the Adna starting, so then everything follows suit, that the Shem Havaya fits in combined with Adna in a way that in every single level the Adna is dominant, as opposed to the previous message of Shem Havaya, Shem Adna into Shem, the Adna into Shem Havaya, and every letter of the Shem Havaya, as such, the energy of the Shem Havaya reigns supreme on every single level, and therefore you only feel that Yichud HaChodilah, the supreme oneness, and as opposed to the Shilov of Shem Havaya in Adna stands. The focus is on the Adna and whatever it produces, but even there, within that time and that place, in that incident, in that occurrence, you find the godly message. And this is what we're going to learn, try to follow with a bit more text over here. Hashem is higher than time and place from the perspective of Shem Havaya, which is the Emes Hashem. He finds himself within place, within time. He's one with the character of Malchus, right? Synonymous with Elikim, Gvura, Adnas, from which time and place were created. And that's the Yichud Tata, the inferior oneness. Shilav Havaya Ba'adnas Baruch Hu. It's the Havaya, the togetherness, the synthesis, the fusion of avaya into adness, because your focus is on adness. Baruch Hu, blessed be He. The Hainu Shem Hu Sivat Musi is Baruch Hu, and Yikub Shemin So Baruch Hu, the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Or rather, the translated in exactly the words. The Hainu Shem Hu Sivat Musi is Baruch Hu. It was the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, blessed be He, which is called Ein Sof Baruch Hu, which is called and defined as infinite, blessed be He. Moleus koloretz mamish bizman mokim, fills the entire land within the time and within place which is created by Shem Adna. So even you're focusing on the production of Shem Adna, in that moment you have the Ein Sof coming through that particular second, in that particular place. Because in heavens above and the world below and all four sides, it's all full with the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu equally. Because so too is in the land below, like in heaven on high. Because all this is place which is completely annulled and in essence b'mitzius, in the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, hamislabish boi adei midas malchusis Baruch Hu, which invests in it through the midah, the cap of malchus and yichodis b'yis Baruch, which is one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We'll stop over here with a text. It says, because if you look at the truth is that nothing really exists from the perspective of Shem Havaya. So even after there's Malchus, the first message is it's also Batal Shem Havaya. But here, even if you're focusing through Malchus, you should know that in every single time and space, it carries the message of Ein Sof, the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because that is its soul energy. It's like, back to that example, I use the same example time and again, so many other examples. Let's stick to one. When you see the light coming out of the green glass and sends you the message, you can go. So it's bright. That's why at night it illuminates. It shines. But it's not the glass which is shining. It's that same white bulb on the other side which is shining. So when you look at the light, your message is green, but it's what is coming through is just the same light, that same bulb. The glass doesn't have any of its own light. So when you want to identify the light parts, you don't, because you're looking, it's a green light, and therefore it's a green light, so I can go. You're not focusing, you're not paying attention on the fact, no, it's a white light coming through a green glass, which there is no light on its own. The green glass has no light on its own. It's a regular plain piece of green glass. And without the light, especially at night, or at any time, you wouldn't know what to do from the perspective of that green glass without the shine. And you're saying a green light, but there's no green light. It's the same white light coming through the green. And therefore, if you really want to dissect and say, what color is the light? No, the light is that bright white bulb. The green is just something which covers up over that bulb, and it allows the message of green to extend itself, you and the people around you, to get the message, to go, or the red to stop, and so on and so forth. And the same thing as I was saying over here, you could focus on the message of Malchus, Gvura, Adnos, which creates the whole phenomenon of time and place, and Emel B'Layam, which really fits into the whole master plan of making HaKadosh Baruch Hu Adira B'Tachtein, an inferior place. Inferior is only because of the Malchus production, granted. But in the end of the day, it doesn't have its own energy. It's an energy which is coming through the Shem Havaya, and as such, in essence, really doesn't exist. It stands with a complete bittul, but in which is the first message of Yichudi Lo, the supreme oneness. Then everything is truly batal b'metzias, and that's the truth. So even if you're focusing through the cap, which is Malchus over here, and in this case rather, and you're focusing, you see the Zman Mokim. So even when it's broken apart from the perspective of Malchus and Gvura and Shem Elikim, Bereishis Bar Elikim, Shemai Bar, it's all these details which come through Shem Elikim, and every single one of them, it's full. It's all about the Ein Sof, the true infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As Hashem going to explain. So what's the advantage of there is an advantage in the end of the inferior yichud over the superior, and therefore they're both significant, and they're both part of the mandate of the yid to experience at both of them certain times, one over the other. Like davening, the true idea of davening is to uplift ourselves. He's spashtos agashmis, like we spoke. And again, so much enriched with this famous vart of the Baal Shem Tov. Because it's the point that we have the ability to transcend anything which is associated with the physical, to enter into the world of true achdus, where things are real, which is the Ein Sof himself. the message post-davening. Perhaps we'll take a little more time in the next class. But maybe if we remember to elaborate in this post-davening, it's more, I'm plummeted into this reality of time and place. And Hashem did that, put that cap on because He had that master plan in order to make the dwelling place for HaKadosh Baruch Hu bit tachtenim in this very physical world, which could only exist based on that cap of Malchus. So there it exists with the desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore I'm focusing on Olam, but nonetheless I find the Ein Sof within Olam itself. So it's the inferior Yichud, but nonetheless there's virtue, an important expression, which is significant in the whole makeup of the Avodah of the Yid, that inferior Yichud as well. As such, the sandwich, so to say, of the Achdus Hashem, when it comes milmayla lamata, meaning to say, as it's presented in the supreme oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the Yichud Tato, the Shiluv Avai Be'adness, in every situation, even when it looks real, or when I'm focusing on it, it's carrying through that message of the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And as such, I live the second, the moment, I align myself with the infinite message of Hashem. And if it's the place, I align myself with I allow the place, I align myself primarily, which I'm on that place, with the infinite message, or the message of the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And even the place itself, I introduce more and more of what it truly is. Emes Hashem La'elam.